Let's go. Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface into depths unknown. I'm your host, Jonny Tooma, joined by a very special guest, Marvin from the Fantasy Footballers. Marvin is a writer for them, one of the sharpest guys I know when it comes to football. So super excited to have you on the show, man. Marvin makes a rookie model every year. One of my favorite things that I see on my feed during the offseason. So we're going to talk through the results of his rookie model and 3 polarizing players that can make or break your fantasy league. So let's get straight into it, Marvin. Which rookie are you most excited about coming from the results of your model?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is super fun. Been looking forward to this. And honestly, just talking about this class as a whole, it's so intriguing and so polarizing. I think one of the things that everyone gravitates to is the running back class, right? We'll see here in my model in a little bit, but 4 are currently in the plus 90th percentile for me, which historically I've had a 93% hit rate. And that
Wow.
it even includes day 2 guys, right? So it's not just purely draft capital driven. So like Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, they're in that range. So when I think about guys I'm excited about, it's that running back group, right? And one of the guys that I really like is Omarion Hampton. I think Ashton Jeanty gets a lot of love, rightfully. TreVeyon Henderson gets a lot of love, but Hampton, to me, his film and production profile, the fact that he's a big-bodied running back with just really impressive strength, balance, and you look at his production, his analytics, he is second in this class in experience-adjusted production behind only Ashton Jeanty, finished with a 96th percentile junior season. And we know the draft capital is going to be there. It's the question of is it going to be first round or early day 2? To me, it honestly doesn't really even matter because right now he's in that 93rd, 94th percentile based on projected capital. And that honestly just has some of the highest hit rates. Like I mentioned, anyone in that range is in good company. And so truthfully, this class is just so exciting. Like we haven't seen a class this deep since 2017. I'd argue it's better than 2020. And so when you think about guys like Hampton, I think they're one of the safest. And regardless of if you go with Henderson, Judkins, right? We're going to talk about him in a little bit. It's a good class that we can feel comfortable in. But Hampton's the one that I'm honestly, outside of Jeanty, super excited about in this class.
Yeah, he's a freak, man. When I was at the combine, that was one of my biggest takeaways was that he was a man amongst boys. Like, I mean, the arms were the size of my whole midsection. I mean, this dude is thick built, stout, extremely productive. I'm going to throw up your rookie running back model here so we can give the people a little bit of a glean into it. Really well done stuff that you do, man. And so we're going to dive deep into this. Talk to me. You said 93% hit rate. What does that mean? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so I mainly look at the first 3 years of a running back's career in this model because I want to see how many of them can return value as quickly as possible for dynasty managers. And so when I think about a hit rate, it's a top 24 season, minimum of 1 within their first 3 years. And so the guys in the 93% and that 93% hit rate that I mentioned in that 90th percentile group or above, you almost always hit and produce at least a top 24 RB2 season or better. Now, I say that because that's like my threshold, but a lot of the guys in that range have produced RB1 seasons, if not multiple, to start their career. So it's just a really good group that obviously the higher up you are, you get into the ranges of Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, some of the best college running backs. But even in that lower end, you still have guys like Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook. And it's just a really solid group of guys that not only check the draft capital box, but also production and athleticism.
Damn. So, I mean, I think to your point, Ashton Jeanty, Omarion Hampton, pretty clear. I think people know that they got to take those guys at the top end of drafts. And you're saying, yeah, there's a 93% chance that they're going to hit for you. I think the more sneaky one is TreVeyon Henderson, to be honest, because I think he could fall into the mid or late first in some dynasty drafts. Certainly draft capital is going to ultimately be a huge deciding factor, but love that you had him this high on your model. Can you talk a little bit more about the key ingredients that go into this model in terms of like college production? Is there athletic testing involved? What sort of carries the most weight in this model for you?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on which position you're analyzing, right? But I think in total, I mainly just look at a handful of metrics. It's not anything super groundbreaking, but I look at experience adjusted production. So I look at it's a metric that looks at every year of their career. Do they grade or produce above or below average compared to the NFL running backs that have succeeded at the next level? And so you look at a freshman season, right? That holds a ton of value if someone produces really highly in that time of their career, because not a lot of running backs produce at a high level. Then you think about Jonathan Taylor was one of the ones that did that. Saquon Barkley, and in this class we have TreVeyon Henderson, who's one of those guys, and so that's why he grades so highly as well. Uh, Beyond that, I look at career efficiency. I factor in strength of schedule because that does matter. If you have an easier schedule, you're not in a power
Nice.
conference, SEC. It does matter, and those that holds a little more weight. And we look at Ashton Genty right here. That's also why he's a little further down, because that strength of schedule playing at Boise State was a little easier than had he, if he had played at a different school. Not to say that he wouldn't have produced, because his numbers are just amazing and astounding, right? I fully believe if he was on a different team, he would have crushed it. But it does factor into the model as well. And then truly the biggest thing is draft capital. That's is the most predictive metric, and that will a lot of times move running backs, wide receivers, tight ends up and down the model, because it is the most predictive metric that we have. And then the last piece is athletic measurables. That one will vary based on the position you look at. For running backs, it has a solid signal, so it is factored in there. For tight ends, it has the strongest signal, so it's a heavy indicator there. For wide receivers, it's not honestly that predictive, and so it's just a small piece of the pie. So not as big of a piece in the wide receiver model.
Yeah, that it adds up. I had Rich from Fantasy Sanctuary. We talked through his rookie model.
Yeah.
Similarly, so I think he just disregards athleticism completely for wide receiver. And then to your point, tight end being the most important there, and running back certainly being statistically significant for athleticism. One of the guys I want to dig a bit deeper on is Quinshon Judkins as well. Cause between you and I'm sold on TreVeyon Henderson. Like, the guy's lightning in a bottle, solid pass protector. I think he's a guy where he might not ever be a bell cow, but we all know he can take it to the house and put up like Devon Achane like production on 10 or 15 touches a game. Right. Quinshon Judkins is a little more nebulous to me, because I think people do think he can be a bell cow, like a 3-down running back at the next level. And, your model is all over him, right? To your point, anybody above the 90th percentile is a strong chance to hit. And so, I guess you might already say, like, if I asked what's your level of confidence in Judkins, you'd probably jokingly respond back and say 93%, right? But can you talk to me a little bit more about, how bust-proof you think he is specifically?
Yeah. I think he is definitely one of the more polarizing guys, because I was digging into this a little bit when you had thrown me this question beforehand, because Judkins is one of the running backs in this class that peaked as a true freshman. Like, he had an elite true freshman season that was in the 97th percentile. The only running backs right now, and this maybe puts into perspective how good he was then, the only running backs with a more productive team adjusted or market share season than Judkins since 2013 are Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, and Jonathan Taylor. Like, that's how good he was when you adjust for the team, right? Because to me, raw stats say one thing, but if you adjust it for the team's ecosystem, how good of an offense they were, that's when you start to see that stronger correlation. And he graded really well there, and that's partially why he grades so highly here. But I was curious to see, historically since 2013, has there been a running back that has peaked as a true freshman and was drafted with day 1 or 2 capital? No one. Like, he is very unique in that we don't really see someone. Exactly. So that could be a good or a bad thing. But if you look at his total production, like, he still grades, and I'm like scrolling through here just to confirm, he still has a really good experience adjusted production score, still in the positive range, which is exactly what we want to see, right? That means he was above average in total for his career. And that's, he's actually up there right now, just behind Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton. And so that tells you how productive he was. Now, his efficiency did taper off. It improved a little bit in his junior season, but it's not the efficiency of a TreVeyon Henderson, who was by far more efficient in that offense. But in total, his profile still grades out fairly highly in my book because of just how consistent he was. It was never fully elite, so that brings him down a little bit. That's why he's not 99th percentile or even Ashton Jeanty 97th percentile. So it brings him down a little bit, but the overall production as a true freshman, staying consistent and staying involved, even in a committee in his final year, holds a lot of value. And last thing here that I'll throw out is running backs in the plus 90th percentile, as I mentioned, have a really good hit rate. But if I filter on guys with similar weight, production, athletic profiles as a Quinshon Judkins, I get guys like Breece Hall and Darius Geis. Now that's the only two that come up, which shows you like there aren't as many with his type of big-bodied profile with his production. And Geis, you could argue, could have been a really good NFL running back if it weren't for injuries and other things. But obviously we know what Breece Hall is. And so I do feel confident that Judkins can emerge. And the biggest thing I'll always focus on is draft capital. If a team drafts him with day 2 capital and his production profile, I would be shocked if he doesn't get a bunch of opportunities and breaks out in the NFL within his first 2 years. Like it rarely happens, right? That they miss. And so that's where I just feel confident in that. I'll trust the production profile. And if he starts to slip in the draft and he goes into like late day 2 into day 3, which I doubt will happen, then I'll be off of him. But until we see that happen, I'm still going to believe in the talent and the production we saw in college.
Yeah. So follow-up question there. You mentioned those seasons, like his freshman season being comparable to that of like Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley in terms of like the best experience-adjusted production seasons, I believe. Mm-hmm. Those guys, they weren't true freshmen when they were doing that though, right? Like those statistics that you're pulling could have been from any of their seasons, right?
No, I'm just looking as true freshmen, like the seasons by true freshmen of those running backs, like his season. Okay. Now, if we were to compare his season to every other season from those running backs, it grades a little further down. But as a true freshman, we rarely see someone produce like Quinshon Judkins. So that's where if you just isolate true freshman seasons by all running backs drafted since 2013, he's up there as one of the best.
Dude, I didn't know that Barkley and Chubb and Jonathan Taylor were that hot out of the gates as true freshmen. So I'll have to go back and do a little like revisionist history on that. Yeah. Because to your point, that's a pretty good group of guys. Mm-hmm. I would be remiss if I don't pull up the player profiler page and show you his best comparable player.
Hey, there we go.
So there you go. Yeah. I love that. I love that, you're coming at it from a data and experience adjusted production. I think a lot of what we do is production, but also athleticism, mm-hmm. size. And so to see him kind of come out with that similar best comparable player as that group of elite company you mentioned shows that, a little bit of synergy, right? And I think this is something that I really appreciated us talking through because it brings a little more confidence to me in a guy like him. Mm-hmm. Because I'll throw it out. I'm gonna throw out something that I think a lot of people might still be noodling on. Is there is a lot of these guys get so inundated by like advanced metrics like elusive rating, missed tackles force, yards after contact per attempt, and I don't think that Judkins is like a god in some of those advanced metrics. So I think you've already made your case, but do you have any like words to anyone who's weary because of those metrics that he didn't necessarily crush in?
Yeah, I think it's worth definitely considering. I think that's why I don't believe he's bust proof, and he could very well be part of that 7-8% that doesn't hit in that 90th percentile range. Like he could be the one that hasn't hit there over the last couple of years, and that's definitely in the range of outcomes. It definitely is concerning that the efficiency tapered off, to your point, like the missed tackles forced. I don't have that in front of me, but I remember that was not very highly ranked for Judkins, whereas Henderson, I think, was in the further up. And so, right. That does impact his ability, especially if he lands on a team with a not so great offensive line, not a great offensive ecosystem. But that's where I do think at some point, if he gets early day 2 capital, he will get the opportunities. And especially if we just look at this from a fantasy perspective, volume is king, right? You get drafted early, you're going to get the opportunities. And we saw him as a true freshman. That was his most efficient season, actually play relatively well and efficiently. And so I do still think that upside is there. It's just obviously in his second season, it tapered off. It wasn't the greatest season for him in that offense, but then and then last year he did improve. And so while I don't think he's a perfect prospect, I do think there's a lot of good things or more good things that stack up for him versus, yes, you do have to factor in some of the negative things where there is a chance that he doesn't break out. But in total, I still like the profile, even though there are some flaws and potential red flags.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of negative marks, man, look at Woody marks, Joquavius marks there, all the way at the bottom of the model, which is crazy because like I play a lot of fast draft where we do rookies only, like origins, best ball, and his ADP is in the first couple of rounds, and I mean you've got him buried here, beneath a bunch of running backs who he's going earlier than on fast draft. So I don't want to dwell on Woody here too much, but maybe give me one guy in the later rounds, kind of in the second, third tier, that is, whether it's just based on the results of your model or from some of the film you've watched, that you'd say, hey, that's my favorite guy in the later rounds at running back.
Yeah, I've seen him kind of go all over the place in drafts right now. I think his ADP is a little higher than depending on the format you're looking at. But Devin Neal to me is one of the guys that
love it.
I'm a big fan of. I think there are two running backs I could talk about here, and depending on how how much time we have here, we can talk about both. But Devin Neal is someone I'm a big fan of that has never had a season below the 74th percentile, accounted for over 20% of the team's scrimmage yards in every season at Kansas. And he ranks actually third in experience adjusted production in this class behind only Genty and Hampton. So he's up there with some of the best. The reason he's further down is because of draft capital. But the fact that he's like in that range of like close to the top 10, even with day 3 capital, shows you how his production is really carrying his profile. He's athletic at 210 pounds. Now, not the most athletic guy, but the production is certainly there. And that to me shows a lot that if he were to move into late day 2, hypothetically, like my model would have him up there as the RB6, right below Caleb Johnson.
Okay.
And so that's where like draft capital could really swing things for him. I could see it happening. I could see a team falling in love with him and just taking him in late day 3, and he's going to move up my board pretty quickly. But that's because he checks a lot of the production boxes, the efficiency metrics, and obviously his production is just, every year has been consistent.
Yes, man, I love that you mentioned Devin Neal. If you rock with me on the Dynasty Deep Dive, there will be tons of Devin Neal propaganda coming over the next few weeks and months. I interviewed him at the Combine. I love the way he talked about ball security. A guy who I think had like almost more touches than any other running back on this chart across those 4 seasons. And admirably low fumble rate. Zara from Football Guys, when I brought him on, he kind of goes deep dives into pass blocking running backs, mentioned him as one of his top 3 running backs. So when you got a guy who can secure the rock, can do the dirty work in the passing game, and is incredibly shifty, I think you've got a really good potential sleeper on your hands. My comp for him, personally, people are going to say, oh yeah, it's just because he had a crazy rookie year. But I see a little bit of Bucky Irving in him, in that like make you miss, elusivity. He's, to your point, he wasn't a burner at the Combine. He wasn't a burner on tape in college, but he just consistently was cranking out positive yards and playing on a terrible team where they knew the defense knew who they had to stop, and they still couldn't stop this guy. So I love that. I don't want to cut you short. Give me that second guy that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, to me, I'm a big fan, and he's, I think, later in ADP than Neal is, actually DJ Giddens, Kansas State.
Yes.
Someone who I just love his combination of size and athleticism, very elusive as well. And watching his film, just watching him operate in the open space, like he's just a really um, just elusive and consistent running back that um, I just think the production is there obviously later in his career, but I think the overall story of him coming in as a walk-on for Kansas State and playing behind Deuce Vaughn for a couple of years, but then in his final 2 seasons had over 1,500 scrimmage yards. Like the story of being a walk-on and becoming now a potential day 2 running back is just so awesome to see. And for me, I always gravitate towards production. 94th percentile season in 2024, which shows really his upside there. And there's just a lot to like about his efficiency and production profile. And I think the best part about him as a prospect is you may not even have to spend all that much right now. You talked a little bit about the Origins draft. I think his ADP is further down. You can draft him, and he might just be someone that moves into day 2 and be a potential contributor in his rookie year. I just think he just has that solid profile, athletic ability that could be a contributor on an NFL team. We're just kind of waiting on the draft capital, but I am hopeful he gets drafted a little earlier than we expect.
Dude, birds of a feather flock together, because like those are my 2 guys as well, man. Maybe it's just because I'm a CU fan and have seen them. They both torched CU this year, and I'm like,
yeah.
Like at a certain point, you don't hate the opponent. You got to respect what is game when you see good game, and those guys are both awesome. I've made posts on X that have gotten some good traction about Devin Neal and DJ Giddens being guys that you need to be prioritizing in rookie drafts. So I love that we're in lockstep on that. I actually I posted the DJ Giddens post like a couple of weeks ago, but last night I had the Kansas State running back coach retweet it. So that was pretty cool to see. I love when some of these coaches come out of the woodwork and show love for the guys. Before we close it on the running backs, I'll just throw up DJ Giddens' player profiler page. I like the Travis Etienne best comparable player, guy with some speed, a guy who can, who I think could be very productive at the next level. And you've got to love those athleticism percentile scores: 92nd percentile 40-yard dash, 91st percentile speed score, which essentially just adjusts the weight for the 40 time. And then the burst score is based on his jumping, and it is an indicator of how explosive he is in short yardage, and just overall, explosiveness being a kind of a key metric for running backs. This was a freaky class in terms of running back athleticism, and we have him as a top 3rd ranked back. So when you pair that with incredible production, and I think something that also doesn't get enough love is kind of the key. This, what I've heard is kind of a golden number in college is 10 yards per reception to show that you can be an effective pass catcher at the next level. This guy's averaged over 10 yards per reception in every single season he played in college. So wheels up, man. Green flags, no red flags when we're talking about a guy like DJ Giddens. And to your point, you're getting him later in the draft. So awesome, man. I'm glad we spent so much time on this rookie running back class, because that's where the gold is in this draft class. I think everybody knows it. You mentioned that 2017 historical class, and almost everybody I've talked to has used that class almost in the same breath, right, as this class we're seeing now. So truly a special class, and these are the types of players that can make or break your fantasy league. So we're going to next get into Marvin's wide receivers and then close it out with his tight end models. But first, we're going to run a quick ad.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Jimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite Player Profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
Man, I've had so much fun with that Origins tournament. It's just like for sickos and degenerates like you and I, man, just a place where you can feel at home. There's nothing like it in the business. A rookies only best ball draft. I mean, like that is a dynasty degenerates dream, right? So had a lot of fun playing that. I'm almost maxed out my entries for the pre-draft tournament. There's going to be one after the draft once draft capital comes in. So show some love to Fast Draft. You can use my X handle you don't need the @ Fantasy Picasso, and you get a match on your first deposit. So let us get into the wide receivers. And, I want to start. I'll throw up the model as I kind of explain why I want to talk about this guy. You've got Tet at the very top, man. 93.9 percentile, which I got to imagine is a great score for you. I ask a couple people this, and most of the answers are no, just to be honest. I'm just giving you the truth before. Yeah. Will Tet be a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football in his career at any point?
Yeah, that's a tough question because I know he's very polarizing. We talked a little bit about hit rates here. He just actually missed the mark. I think for my model, for wide receivers, you actually want to be a little higher. 95th percentile or above actually gets you a hit rate of 82%. Anything 90 percentile or above is actually 66%. So it's still solid for where Tet is still kind of in that range.
Is that top 24 or is that top 12?
Top 24.
Okay. So not even guaranteed to be a top 24.
Yeah, exactly. So he is guaranteed for that. Now, if wide receiver one hit rates, it's a little lower than that. And you'd be surprised, like the hit rates for wide receivers, even in the first round, are a lot lower than we think. Like for even a top 24 season, the average is 50%. And so you don't always get that out of even first round wide receivers. You don't always get a top 24 season. And it's definitely less frequent that you get a wide receiver one season. But to me, there are things in Tet's profile that I do like. As I mentioned, the higher grade comes from the experience adjusted production. So again, you want to look at them progress every season and reach the tier. One of the metrics I look at is receiving yards per team pass attempt. And if they ever hit 3 receiving yards per team pass attempt, that is an elite season. If you can cross that multiple times, that's actually that's even more impressive. And Tet managed to do that twice. That's how good he was. And now this is obviously it's a limited sample size, but wide receivers that are around the 94th percentile with similar athletic measurables and just similar production percentile scores, you get Alshon Jeffrey, DeAndre Hopkins, and Rome Odunze, and then Tet is right there with them. And so you think about those big-bodied wide receivers that produce in college, he's among some decent players. And now we don't know what Rome Odunze is going to be, but Hopkins was obviously really good. Jeffrey had some good seasons, but tapered off a little bit. So if you think about kind of the range of outcomes, I think Hopkins would be amazing. If he could produce multiple wide receiver one seasons, I think that ceiling is there. Jeffrey maybe is more the middle point where he does have some productive years and then tapers off a little earlier in his career. And then Odunze is a little bit of a wild card. But the fact that he's up there with some of these guys shows you that the upside is definitely there. And is he a perfect prospect? No. Yeah, he doesn't grade as highly as Marvin Harrison Jr. or even someone like Malik Neighbors. Those guys were all like in that 97th, 99th percentile. That's where you want to be, because wide receivers, as unfortunate as it sounds, like we invest in them in rookie drafts, a lot of times they just miss. And so you want to see that just a little more to move him up there. And part of it was, strength of schedule was one of the reasons why he was a little further down.
Okay.
Yep. But still a good prospect. If you're in the 90th percentile or above, you're still solid, right? And if he gets first round capital, I'm not going to worry about it all too much. I'm still going to draft him as wide receiver one. But there's still that risk. I think there's more of that risk with him versus last year, where I felt really confident in Neighbors and even Marvin Harrison Jr., who maybe disappointed a little bit. I still believe in both those guys as better prospects than Tet. And so I'm a little wary of Tet, but still, I'm still fine taking him where he's at in ADP.
Yeah, man. I'll be honest. You're making me a little nervous, though, when you talk about, we go on that running back class and you're saying like these guys, 93% chance they're going to get a top 24 season.
Yeah.
And then we talk about Tet and you're like, it's not quite the same likelihood, right? So it just sounds like it's a bit more of a gamble than what people may expect. Like I love the guy. I think he's a very solid player, but I like also bringing kind of demystifying it. And I think that's what some of the numbers do, and allow you to kind of think a little more clear headed than just watching him. You ever see him like catch the ball and put it between his legs in midair and stuff?
Exactly.
Like the dude's a freak. So like you watch that and you're like, adjust the ranks, number one overall. But he's a solid player, but it sounds like you're not fully sold that he's gonna make it as a top player in the NFL, and rightly so. So the other guy I want to dig in a little bit at the top, I was a little disappointed in you, Marvin. Like you got to find a way to tweak this model to make Travis Hunter in the 95th percentile. Is there a reason that he is a bit further down than Tet?
Yeah. There's a couple reasons. So obviously he didn't play a wide receiver, a majority of his snaps at wide receiver until later in his career. That obviously factors into this a little bit. Could he have ranked higher had he played wide receiver since his freshman season? Very likely. But even in his final season, his market share adjusted production ranked below McMillan. And so that looks at like how much of his team's receiving production did he account for, and how efficient was he on those opportunities. With that, McMillan actually still ranked a little higher. And the other reason why is also strength of schedule. So, I think Colorado's strength of schedule was a little tougher this year, and he had a good season then. But last year, I think it was a little further down, and that brings down his production, and how much it's weighted is further down because of that. But really, it truly is the market share adjusted production. And then obviously the flaw in the model, and this is, to your point, maybe I need to figure out a way to put this in here, is how can it tell that he didn't play wide receiver for the full for the entirety of his career in college, right? Because had it known that he's also playing cornerback for a boatload of snaps, you probably need to take that into context. And so that's why, we talked a little bit before the jumping on the show that I use this as a guide, my models as a guide, but you have to apply some context to it, and also use your intuition, your gut when you're in your rookie drafts. So Travis Hunter is someone I'm willing to bypass the fact that he's not in that 90th percentile, 95th, because you see the upside is there, and the home run threat. Exactly. So this is just looking purely at like what the model knows from his production and how he performed every single year compared to some of the best receivers that have produced in the NFL. He just ranks a little below that elite tier that I was looking for. But part of that is obviously the context that you need to factor in. And so I'm still a big fan of him. If we find out he's going to play a lot of wide receiver, I'm willing to take him a little higher than ADP right now. But that's mainly why he's a little further down the model.
Yeah, Rich, when I had him on the show, kind of hot take, kind of not, said, if we know he's a full-time wide receiver, I might put him above Ashton Genty. And like, that's my headspace, man, is like, I think this guy could be wearing a gold jacket one day. He's just an incredibly fluid mover, crazy twitch, amazing hands, awesome contested catch ability. So yeah, he's one of these guys where like, you almost have to throw out some of the model and the numbers and just use your gut when you see how fantastic a player like he is. So let's dig a little deeper into this model, because one of the guys who is like creepily high on here, like I saw it and I was like, whoa, like where'd you come from, was Kyle Williams, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think he was kind of a deep sleeper, and then Chris Sims called him his wide receiver too. And then I'm like, okay, now Marvin's going in here and tweaking his model and bumping him up. I'm just giving you a hard time, but
yeah,
is it safe to, like, I mean, as a guy, like we talked about the Origins ADP, like he's going around pick 50.
Yeah.
So, at the 4 or 5 turn, or, 5th round, what would you like? Is it safe to say he's kind of your sleeper pick at that end of rookie drafts?
Yeah, I'd say so. I've drafted him a couple times in a few Origins drafts in that 5th round because he's always going to be there. There are, I think, drafts where I've seen him not drafted, and
Yeah.
I think that obviously shows a value if he does hit. But I just love his career progression and some of the production we've seen from him. Here's a really fun stat. He has the 5th highest receiving yards market share by a true freshman wide receiver since 2010, behind only T.Y. Hilton, Corey Davis, Stephon Diggs, and Julio Jones. Like, that's how productive he was. Now, this was the COVID shortened season, so it was a smaller sample size of games, so we have to factor that in a little bit, but he was dominant as a true freshman. His production did taper off later in his career, but his final season in 2024, he bounced back significantly, where it was a 95th percentile season. He accounted for 38% of Washington State's total receiving production. Those are all really good numbers, and he was just a little under that 3 receiving yards per team pass attempt threshold that I like to see from a wide receiver. Now, he was a little older, but at the same time, we saw some of that upside even early in his career, and so that's why the consistent production throughout and the glimpses of elite production is the reason why he grades so well. And like I mentioned, when you look at experience adjusted production, true freshman seasons that rank highly hold more value there. And then, obviously every single year you raise that bar a little bit. But the fact that he was so productive as a true freshman, kind of maintained that production and showed glimpses of consistency, and then again peaked in his final year, is the reason why he moves so highly here. The fact that he's up there in that, I think that's around top 10, and that's with day 3 capital, shows you how much weight his production is carrying in his profile. If he gets day 2 capital, he's going to move up pretty quickly. And so obviously, you gotta wait for the draft capital. I want to see him get day 2 capital, but even with day 3 capital, where we see wide receivers honestly hit at a really low rate, I think it's like 5%, sub 5% for day 3 guys. I'm gonna be a little weary of Kyle Williams, but at the same time, when you don't have to spend much and it's like a round 5 pick, I'll gladly take him there, considering we've seen wide receivers with his profile produce at the next level.
I'm gonna have to dig up some true freshman tape on Kyle Williams now, man. Now you've got like it's like a true sicko would coming out of this show, right? So, last question here is, like, as a guy who follows your X page pretty closely, I do remember you posting something a while back, like Ricky White. If we're taking a stab at these players at the later rounds, I want someone who's been productive. Ricky White's a good example of that. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of buried in the model here, right? So can you talk to me about, like, was there a change in the model with Kyle Williams kind of getting bumped up and Ricky White getting bumped down? And if so, like, what can you just elaborate on what went into that a little more?
Yeah, so the model does factor in projected draft capital. So the NFL mock draft database shows it's an aggregation of a bunch of mock drafts and gives you like the average spot of where they should be. Ricky White is still further down, but the reason why, even though his total production flags really highly there, is I mentioned experience adjusted production. Like, when you produce at a high level matters. And Ricky White really tapered off, at least in the middle of his career. And then also his true freshman season was not quite as high as Kyle Williams. But where we did see him actually elevate was in his final 2 years here at UNLV. Funny enough, they both played at UNLV at some point in their careers. And Ricky White averaged 45% of his team's receiving yards in his final 2 seasons, which is absurd.
Wild.
He's also second in this class in experience adjusted production, behind only Tet McMillan. So there's parts of that are intriguing, but it's the draft capital right now that pulls him down. Again, very similar to Kyle Williams. If he gets, I don't think he'll get day 2 capital, but if he moves up a little bit, he'll move up in the model and probably won't bypass any of the day 2 guys. But again, the whole point of this is for it to be a guide. And if some of these guys pop, and the fact that they're lower in ADP, it's the reason why I want to invest in them. And honestly, if there's any vote of confidence for Ricky White, I think he's my highest invested wide receiver right now on Fast Draft.
Me too,
in the Origins draft.
So too, yeah.
Because he's just right there. Again, similar to Kyle Williams, they're just right there in the later rounds. If I'm gonna invest in someone, we see higher hit rates from guys that produce highly, right? In college, production has a correlation to NFL production, right? So college production to NFL production, higher correlation. And so I'm going to gravitate towards those guys versus someone who barely did anything in college and just is also a day 3 pick. If I had 2 of those guys, I'd rather gravitate towards the guy who produced, and that's Ricky White for me. So that's why in those 4th and 5th rounds, give me Ricky White, give me Kyle Williams. Those are the guys I'm going to draft.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one name that also sticks out in the middle of those 2 is Torrey Horton, just in terms of production, right? Mm-hmm. Like injuries kind of derailed him. I'm sure that dragged him down in the model a bit. Wasn't himself last year, but I mean, that guy was the heart and soul of CSU. To your point, also going to ding him for level of competition playing at CSU.
Yep.
But I think those are 3 guys that, you have to keep that in mind when the draft happens, and if they get better capital than expected, it's a reason to be excited about them, right? Because they have produced at a high level in college. So, well, cool, man. Let us close out with your tight end model. I got to give a quick disclaimer. Like, this was probably the model that got me the most excited because, I mean, again, I see eye to eye with a lot of what you've got going on here, but I'll just throw it up on the screen. It's not Tyler Warren at the top, ladies and gentlemen. It's a guy by the name of Colston Loveland. Went to a school where they taught him how to be a real tight end. They didn't have him throwing the football, playing fullback, design passes to him and all that garbage. He's not 35 years old, masquerading as a 5th-year senior. Like your favorite tight end, Tyler Warren. No, I'm just kidding. I don't hate Tyler Warren, but I think I mean, neither does your model, right? But I think you've got draft capital baked into this, and Loveland's still ahead. So can you talk to us a little bit on why Loveland is your tight end 1 in this model, even though Warren would have higher expected draft capital?
Yeah, this is again, this is why percentiles matter so much, and what we shouldn't get too caught up in like rankings, because honestly, Tyler Warren tight end 1, don't hate it because he's right there next to Loveland, but it just shows the 2 of them are intriguing prospects, and for 2 different reasons, right? I think Warren had one of the most productive seasons by tight end, albeit as an older senior. But the production was definitely there. I liked his versatility and his usage in his final year. Like, you can really see how that could translate into the NFL. But really for Loveland, it's the earlier breakout age. We do see higher hit rates for early declare prospects, which is what he is. And if he's probably going to get day 1 capital, he's among a decent group of prospects that have found success in the NFL. And so that's where I like Loveland's profile a little more. His production was definitely there. His career production efficiency is better than Tyler Warren's. So that's where he has the edge right now. Now, if Tyler Warren moves up a little more in draft capital and Loveland falls a little bit, but they're still both in the first round, maybe Warren moves up a little bit.
Yeah.
But in the end, honestly, I'm not going to be too caught up on either one, and because I like both of them so much. I think they're both great prospects, and both warrant a higher pick in dynasty drafts. And so last thing I'll share with Loveland to just bump up the hype a little bit. Here's some early declared tight ends drafted in the first round with positive experience adjusted production. So in total, they were always on average they were they produced at or above what a successful NFL tight end did in college, right? So these are the guys drafted in the first round since 2013 that met that threshold. Eric Ebron, TJ Hawkinson, David Njoku, Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers, and Noah Fant. And then Colston Loveland's the only one in this class that could get there. So that's not a perfect group, right? Because you could say, Eric Ebron broke out later. Hawkinson's great. Njoku, in my opinion, is a little underrated. Kyle Pitts, we forget how good he was as a rookie before some injuries hit. And then Brock Bowers is just really good. Now, Noah Fant, we'll forget about that a little bit. But Colston Loveland is a good prospect. As a college prospect coming in, he's really good. And so with first round capital, it's hard for me to argue against taking him over Warren because I just really like him. And the nice thing is, at least in rookie drafts, the way I look at this is one of them usually drops into the second round, early second round. And if that's the case, that's a tremendous value on a tight end that could contribute early in their careers and break out, within the next 2 to 3 years.
Dude, my flaming hot take is that Loveland will be the first tight end drafted. Again,
would love that.
I don't, it's a little bit of anecdotal data, but it's kind of referencing some of what you're talking about. I think NFL does place a premium on players who produce at a younger age. I think they're going to take into consideration that, the more advanced metrics like yards per team pass attempt, right? Where he might not have shattered the earth in terms of volume metrics, like just total receiving yards. But I always bring up like a Sam Laporta type where he was at Iowa. They were running the ball all the time. But if they were dropping back to pass, it was going to Laporta. And that's a similar sentiment with Colston Loveland at a really good school, Michigan. And I also think he gets dogged on a little bit as like a blocker. And I've watched like tons of tape on this guy blocking. And he loses some. But I mean, he can play in line if he has to. But I think teams are going to see this guy and say, I can deploy him in the slot. I can, really use him as like a 3-level threat a little bit better than Tyler Warren. So exactly. I will be excited to see how that unfolds. But that's a guy that if you go to playerprofiler.com and you pull up Loveland's page, my face is on it. I have him marked as one of my guys, and I think he's going to have a great NFL career. It sucked, he's recovering from labrum surgery, so he didn't get to participate in the combine, but at least unlike Tyler Warren, he had an excuse. I think the other thing is people like dog on his size a little bit. He came in taller than Tyler Warren and like 5 pounds lighter. So he's not small, he's a little bit leaner, but, I think that nuanced route running, violent route running will translate better in the NFL than like trying to use sheer brute force. And I kind of joked on Warren a little bit for being like an older guy and beating up on college kids. But I say it only half jokingly. Like the dude I think he's like 23 years old now, right? And you're playing up against 18, 19, 20-year-olds. He's about to go in the league where he's playing, up against guys who are older than him and bigger than they were in college. And so that physical dominating that he did, it just, to me, it's not as easily translatable of a skill. So any final thoughts on the tight end class?
I think this class is equally as intriguing as, I wouldn't say as the running back class. Like that is the cream of the crop in this year's dynasty drafts. But honestly, I think Harold Fannin Jr. really good as well.
Yeah, he's high on that model.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's pretty good too from a production standpoint. He had honestly one of the highest adjusted seasons that we've seen from a tight end. Yeah, in my database. It only goes back to 2013, but he was really good, right? This past year, and so he's someone I really like. We already talked about Loveland and Warren. The fact that you have 3 of those guys at the very top, and you could maybe get one of them in the second round, maybe 2 of them in the second round. I mean, that reminds me a little bit of Laporta dropping in rookie drafts because you had other guys ahead of him that people liked and
Mayer,
rightfully
Kincaid,
so.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad what's going on with Mayer a little bit. I'm still a big fan and hope he breaks out at some point on a different team. But, Kincaid obviously hasn't fully panned out, but, people liked him more, and that's fine. But Laporta dropped. And so in the same way, I do wonder, could Loveland drop? Could Fannin? He's definitely going to be in the second round of rookie drafts, and that's just value right there. So it's a good year to get younger at the tight end position, especially if you have someone like a George Kittle, like even a Travis Kelce, right? Guys that are aging, and you need some youth. These are the three guys I'd target.
Awesome, man. Well, one last question. I was going to close it out, but there was one thing we talked about before the show that I think is like super insightful for fantasy football players. And that was like the little back and forth we had on draft capital and landing spots. Mm-hmm. So, I asked you like draft capital is baked in there, and you said, yes, it is. And then I was like, what about landing spot? Like, do you try and somehow work that into your model based on how good you think the landing spot is? And you kind of pushed back and said like, hey, at the end of the day, draft capital is more indicative. And so can you talk a little bit more about why you think sometimes we may overcompensate for landing spot in rookie draft and how to approach landing spot in rookie drafts?
Yeah, I think when you look at running backs, wide receivers, tight ends that have succeeded, a lot of them, it correlates to draft capital, right? I think draft capital is in some ways a proxy for landing spot because a team won't invest in a player like that. Like I said, it's not perfect, right? Because we don't have 100% hit rate in any of these rounds for any position. But we see that correlation of the higher you're drafted, the more opportunities you receive. And so even if we talked a little bit jokingly, like Ashton Genty landing with the Eagles, right?
Yeah.
If that were to happen, like, my gosh, everyone would freak out because do you still draft him? For me, I would still draft him because situations change. Like, that's something we have to keep in mind. The NFL is ever evolving. Situations change. Teams that might not have a good quarterback right now, they could have a better one next year, right? Because free agency, trades, the draft coming up, right? Things can change so quickly that I would just rather invest in the draft capital and the talent. If you know that they were good in college, the film checks out, the production checks out, invest in those guys. And I think like the inverse of that is, what if someone has day 3 capital, but they land it in a really good spot? Like you think about the Raiders, right? Like that, there's a lot of volume to be had there. But we've seen that time and time again with day 3 guys that lucked into a quote unquote good situation. Damian Pierce comes to mind, right?
Monty Vidal, right?
A lot of guys. Yeah, exactly. Everyone wanted Vidal because of the landing spot. It never really panned out. And so that's where a situation might look good. We don't know the true intentions of a team. The best we have as an indicator is draft capital. And so follow that. Remember that situations change and just draft the talent, because if they are as good as we think they are, and if you're very confident in a player, the cream will always rise to the top. And I do believe that in most cases that'll happen. Some cases it won't. Sometimes, a good wide receiver is stuck with terrible quarterback play. But in most cases, situations change, teams will pivot. And so just invest in the player and the talent, and still don't let landing spot impact, your board too much.
Dude, I think you might need to go get the extinguisher. Your mic is on fire right now, bro. You just set the whole house ablaze. Yeah. I love that, man. That's an awesome way to close out the show. As the proof is in the pudding with you, man. Like, you're clearly one of the best in the industry at this. I don't think you get enough love personally. Like, I don't know what I expect. I guess I expect people to just like be bowing down to you all day or something, but like kind of like me, like I show you a lot of love, right? Can you just close it out? Tell people, give them your X page, tell them where they can find you, tell them, where they can see some of the work you do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that a ton, man. Very much the pleasure is mine to be here. So thank you for having me. This was super fun. And for anyone following that wants to find my content, it'll be on X or Twitter at @FF_Marvin E. I'm also on Blue Sky, Marvin J3, if anyone wants to follow that instead. Most of my content makes its way on either platform, and articles will be on the Fantasy Footballer. So as the off season ramps up, there's going to be more and more coming here. So, and then obviously the season will come around, and there's more Dynasty content every week from me there. So just keep an eye on it, and yeah, it'll be a fun draft and fun off season, and so looking forward to it.
Well, thanks again for hopping on the show, man. Love having you. You're always welcome back. And if you like the show, comment any questions you have for Marvin and I. We will address those. And then give Player Profiler now a subscribe button, because we will have more heat like this coming for you all off season and into the season. We've got shorts on breaking news. We'll be cutting up shorts from the shows. We've got shows like this. So make sure you're subscribing so you can stay up to date and win your fantasy leagues. Good luck, everyone.